What's going on, guys? Austin Zabak here with another YouTube video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the secret to getting a perfect credit score in 2020. Have you ever been told that having too many credit cards is actually a bad thing, or that closing an old account that you don't use anymore will actually affect your credit score in a negative way? Or that checking your credit score entirely is actually bad for your credit? Today, I'm going to debunk all of those myths, and I'm going to tell you how you can get a perfect credit score in 2020, and also why that even matters. Well, growing up, I was taught a ton of stuff that wasn't actually true about credit cards and credit in general. And I'll tell you what, it ended up costing me a ton of money as a grown adult. A couple of years ago, I went to go buy a rental property, and in the pre-approval process, I went to go look at the interest rate, and the interest rate was actually a little bit higher than I was expecting. Now, I thought I was doing really good at the time. I thought that I was making sure that everything was paid on time. I thought that my credit card utilization was pretty low, and I really thought that I knew everything there was to know about having a good credit score. So I decided to go ahead and do a little bit of digging, obviously, because when I looked at a couple of different things, it just didn't add up. Now, keep in mind, growing up, and I don't know what you were taught, but I was taught that if I checked my credit score, that my credit score would actually go down just by checking it. But I really wanted to know why my rate was so high, so I did a bad thing. I checked my credit score. And it turns out that I had an unpaid medical copay amount of $25 that had gotten sent to collections. The bill never made it to my address because they had the wrong address. And there you have it. So what did they do? They sent it to collections. I had no idea, obviously, and then I went to go buy a rental property, and of course, I didn't actually have a perfect credit score. And since collections couldn't get a hold of me because they had the wrong address, they took the liberty of putting a derogatory mark on my credit, all of which, of course, I didn't even know about, all because I was taught not to check my credit. Long story short, I ended up suffering the consequences of a higher interest rate until actually getting the problem resolved. So if you have any sympathy for me at all on having to pay a little bit more money for a little bit higher of an interest rate, that lesson is what made me able to make today's video. So I'd appreciate it if you just give that like button just a little tap, okay? I would appreciate it, and we'll go ahead and jump into the video. There are a lot of things that used to be true in your parents' generation and maybe even your grandparents' generation that just aren't true anymore. So in today's video, we're gonna break down the 6 major components that make up a perfect credit score. And anything else at this point is probably just a myth or just simply not true. The number one most important factor in a credit score is payment history. Your payment history makes up a vast majority of your overall credit score, so it is one of the biggest things that you want to make sure you don't mess up. There is not really that much to explain on this one except for the fact that you never want to miss a payment, okay? Now that includes any type of payment at all. Whether that be a credit card, an automobile loan, a mortgage, pretty much anything. You do not want to miss a payment. Have you ever gotten a 97% on a test and felt pretty good about it? Well, 97% of on-time payment history is not the same thing as 97% on your English test. So to give you an example, if you had a credit card where over the duration of maybe a couple of years, you had 40 total payments that were due, and of the 40 payments, you made 39 of them. I'm no genius, but in pretty much every other scenario in the world, that's pretty dang good. Now, I wasn't that great at math, but having 39 on-time payments out of 40 puts you at about 97.5% of total on-time payments. So basically, having even just one single missed payment could be very detrimental to your credit. So if you don't have any missed payments, I would really try to encourage you to not ever miss one. If you already have missed payments, here's a quick tip. An easy way to combat this is to open another credit card. I know that probably sounds contradicting, I totally get it, but let me just break it down, okay? Say that you had 40 total payments before, but now you have another credit card with another 40 total payments. And let's just say you make 40 out of 40, 100% on time. Your on-time payment percentage would jump from 97.5 to 98.75, which puts you in the green category for your overall payment history. Now again, this is probably not something you want to get used to doing for that particular reason, but it is definitely a way to combat. Now, I wouldn't go open up 5 new credit cards to try to correct your payment history, but it is something you could probably do from time to time. The second most important factor in your credit score is going to be your credit card utilization. And I'll just start by saying that having a lot of different credit cards doesn't mean that you're going to have higher credit card utilization. In fact, it can mean the opposite. If you have more credit cards, that means that your overall credit limit is actually higher. And if your overall credit limit is higher, that means you can spend more money out of that total credit limit without actually maxing out your credit utilization. Right around about 10% of your overall credit utilization is roughly the amount that you want to use. What this does is it shows lenders that you don't actually need all of that money that they granted you, right? If they gave you this big limit, you're basically saying, that's cool, I like that I have this big limit, but I don't actually need that big limit. And of course, on the contrary, if you have a credit card with a total limit of $5,000, but you charge $4,000 on it and you kind of just make your minimum payment, that shows the lenders that you really actually are maxing that out and you're kind of being a little bit careless with it in comparison to your total limit. Credit utilization is really not that complicated. It really just boils down to not utilizing the full amount that you're granted. Now, again, I did say that 10% is typically the number that you don't want to go above. I will say a quick tip at the very end is just not to go down to zero every month. I see a lot of people that will pay their card off in full. The only problem with that is if you leave it paid off in full for a couple of months in a row, what they'll do sometimes, they'll close out that account. And also, lenders like to see that you're using at least a little bit of money that they've lent you, because at the end of the day, they're making a little bit of interest. Now again, what I'll do a lot of times is just leave a very small amount of money month after month, but I'll continue to make my payment and make sure that I don't miss any actual payment. And the third factor that impacts your credit score is the length of your credit history. And this one definitely doesn't have as high of an impact as the last two that we just covered, but it is still something that you will get impacted on depending on how long you've had open accounts. This is why you've probably had people tell you that you want to get a credit card as soon as you turn 18. All people are really trying to tell you is that you want to start building your credit as young as you possibly can. That way when you do get older and you end up wanting to buy a house or buy a car or even rent an apartment these days, pretty much just about anything revolves around how good of credit you have. My real tip here is just to know that when you do turn 18, I would just open up a couple of different accounts. Now, what I would recommend if I were you is find something that you're already planning on purchasing and just financing that actual object along with opening a credit card or something of that sort as well. For example, maybe you need a new MacBook to go to college. You could go ahead and finance that MacBook through Apple, and they'll offer you what I think they call a Barclay card, and that will be a separate card from just like a standard credit card that you would apply for at your local bank. Now you're really just taking advantage of multiple different lengths of history, and they will kind of come together, and later on down the line, it'll just end up helping you out, because if you do open up a new account, let's just say 4 or 5 years from now, the average will be better in your favor because you had multiple accounts in the beginning. The fourth factor that affects your credit score in a fairly big way is actually a derogatory mark. Derogatory marks are negative, long-lasting indications on your credit reports that generally mean you didn't pay back a loan as agreed upon. Remember that story I told you in the beginning of the video about how I ended up with that high interest loan all because of some credit thing that I was never even told about that got put into collections that I never ended up paying? That ended up actually being a derogatory mark on my credit score. There are many different things that can eventually show up as a derogatory mark on your credit score. A couple of things like foreclosures, bankruptcies, not paying your utility bills, your medical bills, or pretty much anything else that you don't pay on time. Also, if you ever get your house foreclosed on, a debt settlement, a civil judgment, and a tax lien. And I believe if you use an app like Credit Karma, although I am not sponsored or affiliated with them on any level, it'll actually show you or give you the creditor's information so you can reach out and get a hold of them. And the fifth factor that affects your credit in a fairly large way is your credit portfolio. And this is really simple. It is actually just the combination of all of the different types of credit that you have. So if you have a credit card, that is a particular type of credit, is a particular type of debt, a particular type of lender that loans you that money. If you get an automotive loan, basically a loan to buy a car, that is also a different category. If you get a mortgage, that is a different category, and there are multiple other categories of debt that you can have on your credit report. They all benefit or take away from your score in a little bit of a different way. So what I will say is having a diversified credit portfolio is definitely important in the long run. Now, I'm not saying you should go out and buy a brand new car because you want to diversify your credit. You're like,
Mom or Dad, I need to buy a new car because Austin told me I got to diversify my credit.
That is not what I'm talking about. All I'm saying is over the long haul, when you do end up buying a home or buying a car, maybe even a boat or whatever, those different things will actually help your credit score again over the long haul. Plus, you are showing different lenders that you're capable of paying different loans with different interest rates and different terms and different dates of which you have to pay. And you can do all of that while being on time on everything simultaneously, which is obviously a really good thing in the eyes of a lender. And the last and final factor that impacts your credit score in a very big way is actually hard inquiries. And this is one that I think a lot of people get confused all the time. There's actually a pretty big difference between a soft inquiry and a hard inquiry. If you get a lot of hard inquiries in a very short period of time, that is a pretty big red flag to a potential lender. So I know that a lot of times you'll see people that'll go and they'll apply for an auto loan. They won't get approved, and then they'll just go to another bank and another bank and another bank, and they'll just continue to not get approved. And those are just a bunch of hard inquiries. So I definitely wouldn't do that if that is you. And if you've done it before, I would pretty much stop doing that, okay? Pretty much anything big that you go and apply for will actually be a hard inquiry. I think even nowadays, a lot of different apartment complexes, when you actually go to move in, put a hard inquiry on your credit because they're doing the background check and they're doing all sorts of other things. Now, it didn't always used to be that way, but I definitely would ask the next time you even move into an apartment or you do anything big at all, if that is gonna be a hard inquiry on your credit. And all I would really do is think long and hard before you agree or give consent to place that hard inquiry on your actual credit, because they will ask, hey, this is gonna place an inquiry on your credit, and you do have to agree. You have to give them the consent. So if you're not 100% sure about that car, or you're not 100% sure about that apartment, and you're just going to look, or you're just going to see what could be, I probably would not let them run a hard inquiry on my credit if I'm not 100% certain that I actually want to live there. And hard inquiries do typically fall off after about 2 years. So if you do happen to move a couple of times over the next couple of years and maybe buy a car or whatever, and you end up with like 3 or 4 hard inquiries, it is going to drop your credit score a little bit, but those will fall off of there again after 2 years, and then your credit score will go back up. You just want to make sure not to stack a bunch of these up. Again, that is really the main thing here. I know that if you have over like 2 of them, it starts to really impact your credit score. So I would just be strategic about how you do it. At the end of the day, really the best way to boost your credit score is to know all of the different factors simultaneously and really focus on each individual factor and be mindful when you're out and about and you're doing different things that it will impact your credit score. And there's a lot of different variables. And again, the main thing is just to be mindful. I see so many people that are not mindful. They're just out there swiping their card, making their payment when they remember to make their payment. They're applying for a bunch of different loans, doing all of these crazy things, and then they actually go to buy a home or they go to do something really big, and at the end of the day, they didn't even realize but their credit was no good. Just put yourself in the lender's shoes. What do they want to see from a consumer? And at the end of the day, just try to follow that game to the best of your ability. Because at the end of the day, that really is what it boils down to. It's just a big game. In school, you got good grades, and in real life, you have to get good credit. And just remember, last but not least, building your credit score, it takes time and it takes consistency. But I preach that all the time, that anything in life worth having, you've got to work day in and day out, be very consistent, and eventually you'll always achieve the goal. That's all I have for you guys. Again, my name is Austin Zabak. If you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you would just go ahead and just destroy that like button, as it really does help me out with the YouTube algorithm. If you go ahead and check out the link in the description below, you'll find that if you click the Webull link and deposit $100, you could get up to $1,400 worth of free stocks. So definitely go check that out. And until then, I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.